I didn't say a word when the HOA president leaned over my kitchen table, her voice trembling with fury about non-compliant gravel. She pointed at the photographs she'd taken of my driveway like they were evidence in a murder trial. I let her finish. Then I slid a folder across the table. Inside was a letterhead she recognized immediately, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers stamped with approvals for load-bearing roadbeds I had personally signed off on during my years in service. I watched her face twist, first in confusion, then pale into silence, as she realized the gravel she was trying to find me for was laid out to spec by someone who had literally built highways for the military. I didn't raise my voice, and I didn't smile. I just let the weight of that document do the talking. The truth is, I never moved into this neighborhood looking for a fight. I bought the house at the edge of town for peace. That's all I wanted, peace and a little space to breathe. After retiring from the Army Corps, I thought I'd finally earned the right to settle down without anybody barking orders or shoving regulations in my face. The place wasn't much at first, just a mid-century ranch with cracked siding, a big oak tree shading the back porch, and a gravel drive that sloped down toward the road. But it was mine, and it had the one thing I'd been missing all those years: quiet. Mornings with coffee in my hand, evenings tinkering with tools in the garage. The rhythm of cicadas carrying me to sleep at night, that was the life I was building. No hierarchy, no constant inspections, no one telling me whether my boots were shined or my lines were straight. I didn't care about status, or appearances, or how the neighbors wanted to keep their lawns uniform. I wanted my space, my quiet, my gravel driveway where I could park my truck without being boxed in by asphalt or some manicured HOA standard. I should have known it wouldn't last. The first notice came taped to my garage door one humid afternoon. Violation of aesthetic guidelines, it said in bold print, like a scarlet letter. The offense? Gravel. My driveway, apparently, was a threat to the uniform character of the neighborhood. I remember standing there with the paper in my hand, rereading it 3 times, trying to understand how something as harmless as crushed rock could suddenly be a problem. I had laid that gravel myself, one back-breaking weekend with a rented spreader, to keep the drive from washing out every time it rained. It wasn't sloppy, it wasn't dangerous, and it sure as hell wasn't anyone else's business. Still, I thought maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe the board had gotten it wrong. After all, the HOA rules didn't even mention gravel. So I wrote back. I drafted a polite letter, cited the bylaws, even included a photo of the section where driveways were mentioned but not restricted. I thought, surely, once they saw that, this whole thing would disappear. Instead, they doubled down. The next month, I got a certified letter demanding I remove the gravel immediately and replace it with approved concrete or asphalt surfacing. They even attached a fine schedule, $50 per week until I complied. When I showed the letter to a neighbor, he just shrugged. That's how they do it, he said, like it was inevitable. That was the first time I felt the quiet shift inside me from mild annoyance to something colder, more focused. I'd spent years dealing with bureaucrats in uniform and civilian clothes. I knew the pattern. They pushed because they assumed nobody would push back. I tried one more time to meet them halfway. I sent emails, asked for a sit-down, offered to show them why gravel was the smartest, most sustainable option for my slope. I never even got a reply. Instead, they started piling on warnings about my truck parked too close to the road, questions about whether the shed in my backyard had proper approval, even a threat about a flag I had flying on my porch. None of it held water, but the message was clear. They weren't interested in compromise. They wanted control. That was the moment I stopped writing polite letters and started pulling records. I went to the county office and requested every plat, survey, and easement tied to my parcel. I pulled the subdivision's original incorporation documents and read them line by line. And late at night, when the house was quiet, I went through the HOA bylaws with a highlighter, marking every contradiction, every overreach, every place where they tried to extend their authority past what the county had ever granted them. Gravel wasn't their jurisdiction, not even close. And once I saw that, I dug deeper. I requested engineering codes, drainage permits, soil stability assessments. I even pulled up military standards for road construction, the same manuals I used overseas, because the irony wasn't lost on me. They wanted to fine me for gravel. I had personally overseen the construction of convoy routes in active war zones. I knew more about load distribution and erosion control than their entire board combined. The isolation stung. Though, neighbors stopped waving when I drove by. Some whispered when I walked into the grocery store. The HOA was painting me as a troublemaker, someone undermining the community spirit. My kids, when they visited, told me not to stress about it, but I saw the worrying in their faces. And there were nights when the weight of it sat heavy on my chest, but I wasn't angry. I was patient. I documented every letter, photographed every notice, recorded every encounter, and I waited until I had the kind of arsenal you don't fire until you know the battle is already won. Which brings me back to that kitchen table. The president had come with her vice chair, smug, certain that another round of threats would finally make me fold. Instead, I handed her a folder thick with documents, county zoning ordinances stating that driveways on sloped terrain could be surfaced with permeable materials, soil stability studies showing gravel was the safest option for preventing runoff into the storm drains, and at the very back, my own Army Corps' certifications in road construction. The room went dead quiet. Their lawyer, who'd come along for backup, didn't even try to argue. He just flipped through the pages, his face getting redder with each one. When he reached the last document, he closed the folder, slid it back across the table, and told his clients they might want to reconsider their position. From there, it unraveled quickly. The board tried to save face, first by claiming they'd made a clerical error, then by quietly rescinding the fines. But the damage was already done. I'd made copies of every document, and I didn't keep them to myself. I shared them with a few neighbors who'd been silently resentful of the HOA for years. Word spread fast. Suddenly, I wasn't the troublemaker, I was the guy who proved the board had been overreaching for years. Attendance at meetings doubled, and not in their favor. Within 6 months, the president resigned, others followed. The HOA didn't dissolve entirely, but it lost its teeth. People stopped bowing to every ridiculous notice, and the board started sticking to the bylaws instead of inventing their own. As for me, life went back to quiet. Nobody taped anything to my garage again. Nobody said a word about my truck, my shed, or my flag. Some neighbors wave now, others avoid eye contact. Either way, I don't care. The gravel is still there, packed down and steady, and every time I roll my tires across it, I feel that quiet satisfaction settle in my chest. I don't gloat, I don't boast, but sometimes, when I look at that driveway, I can't help but think they picked the wrong guy to fight over gravel.